This episode of Around the Layout is brought to you by Spring Creek Model Trains. Family owned for nearly 25 years, Spring Creek is your destination for model trains. Check out springcreekmodeltrains.com for a wide variety of offerings from today's top manufacturers and exclusive products found nowhere else. Whether in Deschler, Nebraska, or at a train show near you, stop in and say wow. To see where they'll be next, visit their website at springcreekmodeltrains.com. New from Home Shops, USRA rebuilt steel boxcars by Atlas Model Railroad Company. Available in both HO and N scale, these beautiful cars feature 7 freelance railroads you've come to know and love, including the Cat Mountain Santa Fe, Delta Lines, Ohio Southern, St. Louis County Railway, Virginia Midland, Miami Valley Railroad, and the Virginian in Ohio. Perfect for the transition era modeler or a classic collector, these cars are a must-have for the freelance enthusiast. Only 50 of each road number were produced in this limited edition collection. Head to homeshops.net to reserve yours today. It's time for you to submit your answer for the question of the month, our new feature where you get to be heard on Around the Layout. Our question this month, what part of your layout tells the most about its time and place? Go to aroundthelayout.com/question to give us your answer. Answers must be received by August 22nd. So again, aroundthelayout.com/question. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arnott. So glad you could join us. It's time once again to find out what's happening in model railroading, and to do that, joining me, the editor of Model Railroad News, Tony Cook. Tony, good to see you.
How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Good to see you again.
We got to meet for the first time in the real world, as they say.
In the flesh. And I think I pulled the phone up and said, oh, this looks different, so we got to talk through the phone or something. I said, yeah, I get a screen in between us. But no, it was great. And boy, we had a great time out there in St. Louis. A lot of things happening. I was very impressed by the St. Louis RPM and the entire event around it, both at the Gateway Center and then all the camaraderie that happened after it as well was really phenomenal.
It was a great show. And, one of the things, and this is kind of relating to the guest we have coming up on this episode, Shane Mason, my assistant, and I went back up to my folks for Saturday night to pick Bandit up and then head back across to Missouri. And my dad was talking about being at the show Friday. He goes, boy, I would say if there was a theme or something I brought back from this year's RPM was 3D printing and that kind of stuff now no longer seems to be that, yeah, but maybe someday. That all of the different stuff, the quality that we saw, it was a real, again, big step forward, it seemed like, on 3D. And I would agree. There was all kinds of great, 3D things there that really turned my head.
Yeah, and one of them from Steel Mill Modelers Supply and Southern Tier Grain Modelers Supply, and I hope I got those names right, Kevin Tully. Kevin, welcome.
Hey, Ray. Hi, Tony.
So is it, your website says Steel Mill, right?
Well, you can go to tullymodels.com and it'll take you to like a leader page where you can go to either way. Okay. One kind of grew out of another. It's like anything that you come up with a fairly decent idea that people seem to like, it snowballs into, hey, can you make me this too?
One recurring theme we seem to be getting, and Tony, you can probably back me up on this. When we've talked to other people before that have started their own cottage industry, the thing that we seem to hear over and over again is, I started it because I needed something.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to cut right to the chase and ask you, Kevin, what did you need? Because I'm sure that's how this all started, right?
So when I joined my local model railroad club, the Prairie Scale Model Railroaders in Lombard, Illinois, the guys were kind of talking to me and say, what are you into modeling? And I'm like, well, I really like to model steel mills. And both of their eyes got kind of like, oh my God, really? And they said, we need to show you something. So they had all this stuff. This guy had started a steel mill on the layout and they hadn't got the bench work in yet, but he had, I think his job had taken him away or something like that. They were happy to have somebody kind of step into those shoes and help with the heavy industry, because I'm actually incapable of doing anything small scale. I had to have 4 blast furnaces because I saw another guy's model train layout that had a blast furnace row with 4 furnaces. So I started watching the super detailing of Walther's blast furnace videos. In my former life, I was a professional fabricator. So I'm watching this guy in the videos scratch building these things called gate valves. And I'm watching him and I thought, it looks like it takes about 45 minutes to do. And then he starts assembling them. And of course, the video sped up and it looks like it takes another 45 minutes or so to put those together. We need 15 per furnace. So I need 60 of these gate valves. And oh my God, I'm going to spend the rest of my life making gate valves just so I can get going. And then I started thinking, I bet you there's other guys out there like that too. Well, I on a lark, I actually had one of the original copies of Fusion 360. I knew a guy that worked there and another guy that was using it, and they had been pestering me for like a year to learn CAD, and I had kept putting it off. And finally, I thought, well, I can draw these gate valves. And then I thought, well, now I got to have a 3D printer. This 3D printer thing is kind of new. And so I really started looking at all the 3D printers. Back then, the nicest 3D printer you could get was a Formlabs Form 2, and they were about $3,500. So I sort of didn't tell my ex that I was getting a $3,500 3D printer. And I got it, and I made one of the valves, and it came out really nice, and I could run one off in like an hour and a half. And I posted a picture up on the Steel Mill Modeling Facebook page. And I have to tell you that thread lit up like a Christmas tree in front of the White House. How much are you going to charge for those? Are you going to sell those? And I realized that there were all these other guys that were stalled. They didn't want to spend, a month of Sundays making gate valves either. And, what really felt good was when I did start selling that stuff, of course I was inundated with, hey, can you make this too? But the thing that I really got to me was that I was getting messages and emails from guys saying, I had this project that was sitting on a shelf for the last 3 years or more because I didn't think I could build that part, or I didn't want to, it seemed laborious to make 15 gate valves so I could keep going. Well, now I can just take them out of the package, and in half an hour, I'm on to the next part of the model. And that felt really good. I was like, okay, so I'm spurring people to model, and I'm helping people out, which I genuinely love to do. And that's how the ball got rolling. And it really literally snowballed from there.
That's one of the trouble things, I think, though, of the 3D printing. It used to be if you kit bashed or made something, the comments would be, that's really cool. I should try that sometime. But when they know you printed it, that's really cool. Make me one.
Yeah, right. That's exactly true.
Yeah, but you make a great point about folks that have probably stalled on projects and, on multiple things, and, waiting for a manufacturer to make, the tooling to make this stuff, the old fashioned way. You're probably going to grow old or rot away before that happens. But now with this technology and the ability to do this, it's just, it is amazing to think that, there's going to be a lot of projects that are going to get a good kick in the pants.
And that's Kevin's whole thing was, when you emailed me the one day saying you had him lined up as our guest for August, like I say, I literally on my phone had his site open because I discovered he made that load for the old AHM calcium carbide car. And again, that's one of those, I have every road name sitting on the shelf. There's always that thought of, hey, this might be cool to try to turn it into something more than the toy that it was of some of those different cars. Like the helium car is always one I think about taking it apart and making a better car out of it. And literally was like, well, this guy makes the decals. He tells you what color it prototypically should be. He's got the load for it. It's like now that there's no excuse not to take one of those 99-cent Woolco special cars and strip it, clean it up, and make here's what it really could be.
Yeah, and they're interesting, right? I mean, everybody likes box cars and covered hoppers and tank cars and stuff, but I think a train, when we all go rail fanning, I always think, there's lots of guys I was lucky today. I saw this, BNSF engine that was still in the war bonnet scheme or something, and I'm the guy that I'm watching the train go by and I'm like, oh my God, I got to see a gondola full of box tubing today. You know, and if you're really lucky, you get to see one of the oddball X cars, and a depressed center car with some goofy load on it, or one of the really specialized cars like the Alice Chalmers car we were just talking about. And obviously we wouldn't see that anymore, but back in the day you would have. But I feel like that's what really makes a mixed freight interesting, is not the box cars and the tank cars and all that, but the gondolas and the flat cars. What do they got on them? What do they got in them? Mm-hmm. And if you go to a guy's layout, or you go to a club layout and you're watching trains go around, a lot of times either the gons either have like, maybe a couch load in it, or they've put together a homemade scrap load to put in it, but they ship like crazy amounts of different things in gondolas. And so the cars like the calcium carbide car, people don't realize they still ship calcium carbide by rail, and you can't get it wet. If you get it wet, it instantly goes to flame.
Oh,
and those containers are waterproof. And the fact that DuPont was shipping containers that were the height and width of a car full of calcium carbide, and they shipped other chemicals in those too, but it's just a goofy car, and it's something that the average modeler can take that car, strip it, paint it blue with rattle can true color paint. The decals are minimalistic on the real car. They're kind of minimalistic. You paint the container silver, take the car apart, put some trucks and couplers on it, and it's a cool load. If you've got a big industry on your layout that might use acetylene, that's how you get acetylene. You use calcium carbide, drip water onto it, and it emits acetylene gas. Wow. And that's what they did with those containers. But, a chemical plant, but it's just a different car than a tank car or a chemical covered hopper,
So you start with your fascination for steel mills, and you had this need for the club. And by the way, you mentioned Prairie Scale Club, and I got a chance to go there, and it's an amazing club. And if anybody is ever in Lombard, Illinois, and gets a chance to go there, I definitely get over there and check it out. It's wild. How long is the track there again, Kevin?
We have 40 scale miles of main line in HO, and we had our silver spike or our golden spike about I want to say about 6 months ago. We had our golden spike.
I almost missed my airplane because of that. Because Kevin handed me a throttle and he got a train started, and I think I ran just the upper deck of it. And I was like, well, I got to go. So we shot out of there, went over your place, waited for the Uber, and I barely made the airport, but it was worth it. It was worth all the rushing around to be able to run that layout. But nonetheless,
right on.
You build your steel mill and you got your components for that. How does the grain mill kind of come in? Is it yet another I need something and this kicks off?
So the grain stuff really kind of started with I know a lot of people say this, but I genuinely like helping people. And a really good friend of mine who, like, you and Tony, I've never met in real life, Chad Thomas. I'm watching him on one of the modeling pages that I'm on Facebook, and he's building a gravity wagon, and I could see all the different parts he was making for it. And he genuinely likes scratch building. So I said, hey, I could make those for you, and you could have 2 or 3 of them. And it wouldn't take you, the better part of a weekend to build one. And he said, well, if you could make them, they'd probably sell. And I was like, I wonder if I could make one of those. Well, I kind of let it go for a little while. And I'm from a dairy town in Western New York that has 5 streets shaped like a box with a street in the middle. And it's all farm country. My mom ran the feed mill in town. I go back and I see my sister every year, and her husband, his family were farmers. And I was there one summer, and I said, hey, Mike, if you got, do your brother know somebody that's got one of these gravity wagons sitting around? Well, he called his brother. His brother is one of those guys that kind of knows where all the implements are for sale in the county. And he said, yeah, this guy's over here got one. Just go tell him who you are. And I sent you over there. So I took my computer and a measuring tape and went over and measured this gravity wagon and drew it up. And I put it up on Facebook and on our website. And of course that lit up like a Christmas tree. And I got, hey, can you do this bend? And you can do that bend, and can you do augers and all this other stuff? And I'm like, I just love industrial stuff. I don't know why, but I like big industry, and steel mills are gigantic, and there are giant grain elevators, but I actually kind of like the small town grain elevators. But I also, one of the things I really enjoy is like any industry that shows the march of time in the industry you're witnessing right there. Like the one we were talking about before the show, you could see the growth of the industry when they added new buildings. Some of the bins were old, some of the bins were brand new. And I like that on a layout, right? It tells the age of your layout. If a guy is standing in front of X industry and it's all just early stuff, well, okay, well, you don't have to look and see their steam engines. We're set in an early period. But the Gravity wagon that I posted up led to all those other products. And then I just started looking around like, well, I don't really see these for sale anywhere on the internet. I'm going to figure out how to make that and make it modular, like the bucket elevators that I do. They're modular. You can make them any height you want. You can make them any configuration you want. And being a professional fabricator kind of helps with that, because I can envision how things are assembled. So I can go the other way and then into its components. And I've made some friends at some of those industries that are happy to give me a print. So one of the things I pride myself on in pretty much everything that I make is most of the products are made from drawings of the real item. So when you get it and I draw it, if it's got nuts and bolts and washers, I put the washer under the nut, and in HO you can hardly see that, but in O scale you can certainly see it. Because when people are doing things today, they want reality, right? So if you can buy a Brock bucket elevator, Brock makes bucket elevators. You can put one on your layout and point at it and go, well, that's a Brock model, whatever. And I think the guys that want $80 box cars with brake detail on the bottom that you're never going to see also want that stuff in their grain elevators, in their steel mills and other industries that you can use my stuff for. So
I agree, though. I think that what you're onto with that industrial thing and the parts and the pieces that 3D printing is so good for is that level. We've as our locomotives, freight cars, and all that's gotten so much better. Yeah, no longer can you accept that old, was it Helgen grain elevator from the 70s? It was basically, I think those are Pringles cans painted white with a tube coming off of them. Right. It's like, that's not really a grain elevator. Yet at one time it was like, oh yeah, sure, that's fine. But yeah, no, it's got to be down to the nuts and bolts and washers.
And what's nice is we were talking about this earlier in the show, and Kevin, you alluded to this. I had some aerial photos of a local mill about 20 miles from me, the Hillendale Farms Mill in Franklin, Connecticut. And I'm wildly impressed because, I'm the one that sees it like the overall picture. Okay, there's a steel building and there's a bunch of bins, but you knew what the bins were. And, and that definitely helps, in me not knowing the industry, but you do, and being able to go to somebody and say, hey, this is the idea of what I want. And then you're able to say, here's what you need to make it look the right way. Because I wouldn't be able to really tell one from the other. I mean, once you start staring at it, I guess I could kind of figure it out. But to have somebody that has some expertise in the field definitely helps.
Yeah, the one thing that I've discovered I love doing research, like model railroader research, right? Everybody likes doing research, and it's really interesting to me to find out all the companies that were and are no longer, and some of them are again, and how you can look at. I'm on a great Facebook page on called Grain Elevators in North America, and that include so the guys include Canada, and you can look at these grain elevators that some of them are black and white photos from the old days, but you can look at them and go, okay, yeah, that's definitely from west of the Mississippi, because these bins weren't really sold east of the Mississippi, and there's stuff that was sold east of the Mississippi, and it's weird that it would be like that, but you can look at it and, if a guy's doing an elevator or a steel mill or some kind of industry on his layout, and he's got a time period he wants to go for, much like having down to the right people on your layout that are dressed in the appropriate clothing. And I know there's people that do that, or the right cars on your layout on the streets and stuff, that, to me, that's kind of important for an industry too, because you want that feel that the industry is set in the 70s, or you want that feel that it's set in 1948. And if you've got the right stuff there, because some of it wasn't made until after World War II, or some of it wasn't made until the 70s or whatever, I think that tells a lot of a tale too, and it's what makes the layout interesting is looking at the industry and going, wow, that really does look like, I feel like I'm standing on the street in 1968 in front of this industry, you know, because I remember that. I remember standing there with my dad, you know, or whatever. I think that's cool. So having the big variety of things like that and the ability for someone to select all those items and put it together or show the march of time at that particular industry, I think that's like important stuff.
Absolutely. And I think we all have certain things we zero in on that we know. Like looking at a layout or something, I can see like a car dealership and go, oh no, Ford dealers didn't look like that by this time. They had this or this kind of signage or whatever. So we all have areas of certain expertise, but then there's things, yeah, like you started talking about that on a grain elevator. I'd be like, well, it's the Walthers Cornerstone one is what I picked. And I put the MFA,
Right.
put the MFA decals on it. I have no idea if that would be correct for the area I'm modeling or not. I'd have to look I mean, you don't think about it.
I'm actually doing that right now. I'm kind of on a campaign. I have a few. I'm on a campaign, and it all started with the Prairie Scale layout, right? Because our layout is massive, and when people come see it, the first thing that I like to tell them is, okay, so there's a giant helix right here, and on the upper level, on one side of that helix, the helix, think of it as the center point of a compass rose, and on one side of the upper level, you're going towards northern Wisconsin, and on the other side of the upper level, you're going towards Quincy, Illinois. And on the lower level, on the one side, you're going towards Toledo, Ohio, and on the other side, you're going towards Paducah, Illinois, right? So I'm walking around the layout one day, and you kind of really can't tell. It's all flat. I'm from, the Allegheny Mountains. So to me, this is like totally flat out here. And whether you're going in any one of those four directions, it's flat. You go up into Wisconsin, it gets a little hilly, but there was nothing really to tell you where you were other than the name of the town. And you had to know that town was in Wisconsin or Toledo or whatever, or Indiana. And so when I started revamping the elevators on the layout, I'm like, well, wait a minute. I know from Tom Johnson that there was a co-op in Indiana that wasn't here in Illinois because it was a state co-op, right? So I started really digging and looking around, and here there are co-ops. Some of them did span several states, like the GTA up in Wisconsin and Minnesota, but there are other co-ops around. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, nobody really offers signage for any of that stuff. And these co-ops, they had huge signage on the front of their elevators. And Tom really kind of inspired me with that. So I'm doing research and really digging and trying to find what co-ops were in what states. For pretty much all of the states. And some people are very helpful that are in other states. They'll send me a logo. This is the logo from here. Other guys might just have a lead. Well, I think it was this when I was a kid. But eventually what I want to have is I want to have a selection of all these different co-op decals that you can go on my site and say, well, I live in Kentucky and we had this co-op here for our feed mills, and be able to buy the right signage, because then when you're doing your layout, that's another thing to make people feel like they're in Kentucky. Even if the layout is in Colorado, the layout's set there, it should have the right signage on all the industries. And so I'm hoping that I can help out with that too. Just as another little detail to tell people where they are on your layout.
Yeah, another thing that I've noticed with feed mills, and of course I'm from New England and we're here in Connecticut, we receive, and then you go out to the Midwest, like the trip to St. Louis. And then I've been, when I was in Chicago, rode down to St. Louis along I-55. It's a clear reminder they're exporting. They're not importing, they're exporting. And, it's a totally
right.
different side of it where, and then I'm putting stuff up and then I'm wondering, well, my mill, and then, oh, wait, this mill really is actually to load cars. We don't load cars here. We unload cars and we send them back empty back to you guys to load them up. So, again, learning the industry, and it's, again, hobbies within the hobby. Like all the stuff that you're talking about is just, all the things. And it's just amazing. Every time it seems we talk to somebody, we find this niche thing that can be drilled on. And you've got it here with both steel mills and grain mills, that ability to really laser focus on that and provide the details that really help tell the story of those industries.
I think that's very important because I think there's a joke at the train club, and it's no slight on Walthers. There's not a lot of companies left that make structures anymore, especially large structures. But, the joke is that you don't want your layout to look like it fell out of the Walters catalog, right?
Right.
As far as structures go. And that can be a little bit of a letdown when you're really hyped up to go see a layout at a club or something, and you get there and it's like, oh wow, look at this. It's, it's the Walters catalog sprinkled all over the layout. Then you just kind of have to focus on the trains and did they do a nice job putting everything together? And, people work to their ability level.
Sure.
But I'm really focused at shows. I have people ask me sometimes, why don't you make X? And I'm like, well, why don't you make this whole thing? And I'm like, well, because I want you to model. It's model railroading. I'm giving you all the difficult parts. You can go get tubing, or you can go get I-beams or whatever from Evergreen or Plastrock and some siding. And why are you settling? I see it all the time on the Steel Mill Modelers page on Facebook. I'm looking for this blowing engine house, and every time I find one on eBay, they're $300 or whatever. I'm like, Dean Freitag built that blowing engine house out of siding and some windows. You can build that yourself out of pieces you can get from Evergreen styrene and spend 10 evenings and put the thing together. It's going to look identical. All they did was copy his, and that's how he built his. And if I could wish anything for the model railroading hobby, it's that people really start investing in learning how to scratch build again. And it makes me crazy when I'm at a show. I can't do that. What do you mean you can't do that? If you can read directions and put a model kit together, you can scratch build. You just are making your own parts instead of cutting them off a sprue. And if you need something difficult, well, there's lots of people, not just me. There's lots of other 3D printing companies that make all kinds of things. There's still the companies making the pewter parts, Scale Scenics and stuff. You can find those items that you don't want to do yourself and accessorize what you're doing. And there's lots of books on it that you can buy to give you techniques. There's YouTube. There's people like me on Facebook and tons of other people that will give you tips. And you can build this stuff yourself and not have your layout look like it fell out of the Walters catalog. Nothing against Walters. But if you've got a particular elevator or a steel mill building or a heavy industry building or something you want, men built that out of materials they can buy from manufacturers of siding and I-beams and whatnot. You're not doing anything different than is done in real life. And it may sound like I'm oversimplifying it because I was a professional fabricator, but as a kid, when you're building models, we all at some point saved up all the parts from all the 3-in-1 kits and built another car out of sprues or a dune buggy or something, or we, cobbled together a building out of balsa wood sheet we got from the Woolworth store. You can do this stuff. It's not rocket science. There's lots of people that do it, and you can make a really nice building and expect to fail. You're going to build a building. It's going to look like crap. So what? Move on to the next building. Ask somebody how you could do it better and build another one. And use accessories from my company, other companies. Bernard's mini prints. He's starting to make stuff too that you can add on to buildings, and he's got lots of detail parts you can add. There's tons of other companies that make all that stuff.
So what I'm hearing you say is you really are looking to have 3D printing. You replace the craftsmanship side of the hobby. You're just looking to see it supplement that and to provide the smaller details so that the craftsman can continue on with that type of scratch building and not see that go away. And I think that's important. You don't want it to become, just 3D print me an entire layout. There's no craftsmanship in that. There is on your side being able to do all the drawings and create all of that, but you still want to be able to have that ability to add the craftsmanship back to the hobby.
Oh, most certainly. When I hear the steel mill guys and any heavy industry modelers, most certainly, because Walters did everybody a big favor with the big buildings that they produced. But the thing that the historical point that I like to bring up to the steel mill guys is that I say, well, where are you modeling? Well, I'm modeling in Pennsylvania, or I'm modeling in Lackawanna. Well, why are you trying to build your blowing engine house out of a Walters kit that's corrugated sheet? That mill that you're trying to model was built before World War II, probably the turn of the century or earlier, when there were lots. I'm just going to speak the plain English, as the Amish like to say. There were lots of Polish and Irish immigrants in New York and Pennsylvania. And it was cheap Polish and Irish bricklayers. And the other thing that was cheap was the brick they were laying. There were rolling mills that were a mile long at those mills that were brick. They weren't pole barns with corrugated sheet siding. They were brick.
Oh.
And so are the blowing engine house at Bethlehem that's still there is brick. And the thing is like a quarter mile long.
Wow.
So, if you're looking to build if you're looking to build a corrugated sheet building and that's how you want your stuff, great. You need to model Chicago or out in California, because those mills were built later. Some of them were built during World War II, and that's why they were built. But they were built from materials that were common at the time, and they were built out of that stuff because it was faster to build. And again, it's a march of time thing, right? At Bethlehem, originally, there's this blowing engine house that's brick that's been there, I don't know when it was built, 1900. And not far from that blowing engine house, well, it's a steel mill, so everything's far away, but there's corrugated sheet rolling mills that they built after World War II. So it's a march of time thing, right? Well, you can get DPM or even the old Walthers modulars brick sheet, or you could just get brick sheet and build a blowing engine house for yourself and have a fun time doing it. And is it scratch building? Sort of. I mean, you're buying components and you're putting a building together and designing it yourself, how big it's going to be. And then you can get stuff from me, like my blowing engine house intake kit, and make it a blowing engine house with all the stuff you would see on the outside of a blowing engine house. It's just a brick building. What you make of it, what happens on the inside is the magic, right? It's whatever you want it to be. But you can do a lot more than just go buy a box kit or search for a year on eBay trying to find something that's discontinued, by looking at what you want to build, whether it's an elevator or a chemical plant or a steel mill building, and say, okay, well, what's that made out of? What were they made out of? The one I want to build is made out of, clapboard siding. Well, you can buy from Northeast Scale Lumber, you can buy, and probably 10 other companies, clapboard siding, basswood. Buy some and start building your elevator. And then you can get all the downspouts and the grain elevator legs and stuff for me. But you can do it. It's not a dark art.
Well, I'll tell you what, after our conversation, when I showed you the mill in Franklin, Connecticut prior to the show, I'm ready to run through a brick wall and go start scratch building, because I'm all fired up about it. And that conversation really had me pumped up, because like you said, you pointed out a bunch of things on that building. It's like, here's what you could do. And now I just want to go do it. So appreciate that. And I appreciate the capability of getting some of the things that I know I couldn't scratch build from you. And I know we're going to be able to work together and get my green mill looking better on my layout. And I'm sure you're going to be able to help a lot of other people out, both on grain mills and steel mills. So why don't you tell us where we would go to find what you have to offer?
TullyModels.com. So it's TULLY, Tully Models with an S, tullymodels.com, or you can go to, you can also Google search steel mill modelers with an S, steel mill modelers supply, or Southern Tier Grain Modelers Supply, and you can find us on Facebook at those names as well.
Well, excellent. We'll provide all the links in the show notes. You can check them out at aroundthelayout.com/116. We'll have all the links there. Kevin, it was awesome catching up with you, and look forward to seeing what you come up with next.
Thanks. Great seeing you guys.
Well, Tony, it was great catching up with Kevin Tully, and really neat the inside stuff that he knows about those industries.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think I've said this a couple of times. I think 3D printing and all of that is, as you said, it's helping the craftsman. It's not replacing. It's not like how Ready to Roll and the fully assembled has mean no one drills holes and puts lift rings on locomotives anymore, because, well, Athearn does that for me. Yeah, this, again, I think for that craftsman stuff, if you're going to build a structure, you're still doing the craftsman level stuff. He's just giving you those odd duck parts or the things that you don't know about. Like, okay, what would be the right whatever on this building? Okay, that's that. And can I buy one of those from you to put on this structure that I'm building? So it's a neat thing. I think it's a real boom for craftsman work.
Absolutely. And yeah, it keeps people going. And hopefully prevents that big stop point that we talked about where people get frustrated because I don't know if I can scratch build this, or I don't know how to scratch build that. Now you've got the expertise like you talked about, combined with the ability to do craftsman work. And time is money too. I mean, the free time that folks have isn't nearly what it used to be. So it helps you keep moving along and make accomplishments on your layout. So very, very cool stuff. And again, 3D printing is going to open a lot of doors in our hobby. And it's great to see guys like Kevin Tully involved with it.
Absolutely. I scratch build all the time. I'll open a box, I scratch my head and go, I don't think I could build that.
I don't think that's what they meant by scratch build, Tony.
Well, I've been doing it wrong all these years. I thought, well, I scratch built that. Yeah, I can't build that. Scratch my head and put it back on the shelf. All right. Well, I will redouble my efforts.
Awesome. So what is happening in model railroading, Tony?
Well, we got some new stuff as always. A lot of what we're going to look at here today is from the usual folks. We also have a new company to talk about as well. But let's kick off with, it's been caboose fever this year. At the RPM, you saw that wonderful Rock Island Bay window caboose that Tangent Scale Models brought out, and I think is almost completely sold out. That's a late 60s to about 1970 international car bay window built for Rock Island. But Athearn just announced another international car caboose. It's not a wide vision, but it's that center cupola. This was done for the Kansas, Oklahoma, and Gulf, and it's international car from the early 1950s. This will be a Genesis model. You get the KO and G in like 3 different lettering styles, and then that road is absorbed into the Missouri Pacific system. So there's some neat red with the buzzsaw coming, and then one of them wandered off to the Green Bay and Western. So there'll be a yellow one there, but that's another new high-end caboose on top of, Athearn just announced the 66 and 76 builds for the International Car Wide Vision for Rio Grande. I mean, boy, any more cabooses are just coming out our ears of late, and that's wonderful because that's been kind of a missing element in the hobby. So Athearn has that announced. You can find that at athearn.com. That's that new Genesis HO scale KO and G and Mopac caboose. The new company I want to talk to you about, Hobby Trax USA, and Trax is TRAX. So, and you can go, the website is hobbytrax.us. And again, that's hobby as you would spell it together with the TRAX. So hobbytrax.us. And they have the iChew video camera. And that's I as in eyeball and chew as in choo-choo. And I have one that was sent to me, and it is just a cool little piece. And it's fully assembled. It's 3D printed. It has a camera in it with USB ports on the back, a little SD card that it carries with it. You can shoot still pictures. You can shoot 1080p or 720p video. It's really cool. It has a coupler on the back end. You can push it around your layout. It's got a little hood over the top for like light reflection. And then the hood also gives kind of the look out the cab window. But if you've wanted an easy way to have that like right away view as if you were a 1/87th scale engineer in the cab of your locomotive, this new HO iChew video camera is available from Hobby Trax, and it's $119, but fully assembled, no work to do. It comes even with a USB cable that you can plug in. The cable charges the unit. There's power and start stop buttons on the top of the unit. I mean, it was so simple. I was able to successfully do it in my first attempt at running it. So really fun piece. And that's a new company. They have a bunch of, like holders for NCE throttles. They've got cables for those. So take a look. I'm forgetting the gentleman's name now. He's called me a couple of times and I've talked to him on the phone. He would be a great person to have on sometime because he's a lifetime model railroader. This is what he's doing to retire. I think he's moving from the East Coast out to California, and this is how he's going to stay in the hobby, that he got rid of his big model railroad and is doing this now. He's a distributor for these products. They're made in the United Kingdom, and he is the official U.S. distributor. So that's Hobby Trax USA.
Neat.
Our friends at Bachman, and you got to meet Matt Stern at the St. Louis RPM. In fact, we ran around. We went out to Kirkwood to watch trains that literally escaped us for most of the evening. And then we went and visited a train layout later Friday evening. Yep. But Matt Stern has just returned from the California National Show. And out there, he did the announcement of Bachmann always does kind of a mid-year. Their catalog comes out right after the first of the year, then about mid-year now here for the NMRA show. They put out a flyer. You can get that flyer by going to BachmannTrains.com, and it's one of the main banners on the site right now, and it's a PDF you can download. All scales included, HO to G that they make. The neat stuff coming in HO, that beautiful Baltimore and Ohio articulated EM1 steam locomotive is coming back. This will be its first time with sound as a feature. It was available as a DCC on board in the Spectrum line. It's now in the regular line and will be DCC sound. And it looks very cool. Those Amtrak Simmons passenger cars, which I know we saw at the one layout we visited, there's more of those coming as married pairs decorated for the Midwest Amtrak service. And for the first time, Amtrak San Joaquins will be coming too. That's in HO scale. In scale, the little GE 44-ton center cab is coming back with DCC. The one thing in the whole group and I emailed Matt this week and said, oh, I'm so excited. They're doing a new HO auto carrier with 4 sedans, and it's that typical really early automobile carrier where they just moved away from boxcars but didn't have the big 85, 89-foot flats yet. So it's kind of similar to like the classic Athearn Blue Box autoloader that they made for Lionel HO and like the Tyco model and such. It's a 50-foot flat car. But what the design they're using, they have a prototype. It was a Frisco that was put together. You can find it online and see pictures of it. And they're building that as a piece that will go on their 50-foot flat car. So this will be a new superstructure for the Bachmann HO 50-foot flat car to have this kind of vintage. It's like a late 50s auto carrier, and it will have 4 fully assembled sedans on it as well, which I think will be a fun piece.
Absolutely.
Pricing is not out on all of this stuff yet. As they do, they kind of announce it way ahead. Most of this is all 2025 deliveries. Again, go to BachmannTrains.com for more information. They also just landed with the Dash 840 CWs are back with DCC and sound. And they've got a 50-foot flat car with a wheel load that they just did too. So lots of fun stuff from Bachmann. I mentioned at the top of our news the wonderful Rock Island Bay window from Tangent Scale Models, and I've got a review of that coming up in October's Model Railroad News that I've just sent to press here in the last week, so that'll be out soon. That is out, and then right after it, they followed up with another run of those wonderful, almost your style. I think you like the 50 or 60-foot, the 86-foot Greenville High Cube boxcars. And there's some neat stuff in this one. The orange Action Road Rio Grande, that wonderful maroon Rock Island with the big white speed lettering. Some really nice roads there, as well as some more modern things. I think there's a gray, and I can't remember if it's Maintenance of Way, Norfolk Southern, but really spans kind of the life of those cars from the mid-'60s till now. But another good run of those Greenvilles.
Yeah, and David was somebody I was actually able to say hello to at the St. Louis RPM as well, and they had a bunch of product on their table, so it was really great to see them. And these 86-foot boxcars are great, but this entire release, one of each, would wrap around my entire layout, so makes it a little tough.
Oh, they're neat cars, though.
Very
and
neat.
Yeah, he always comes to the RPM with something neat. He's got a release every month, but that is usually one of the first places I go when I get to the RPM and see what his new release was. Boy, that Rock Island caboose was just fantastic. Scale Trains, you mentioned when we were talking that has been, would you say controversial?
I wouldn't say controversial. What I would say is this, and I do mention in this, it's hard not to get excited when any of the companies put out a thing that says new product coming, take a guess. So now you're just opening it up, right? Anybody's going to take their guess from, it's going to be X to Y to Z and the entire spectrum is covered, right? But when they don't make what you think that they were going to make, there's a certain level to kind of curb your disappointment, right? Just like, oh shucks, and let it go, because this isn't like life-saving devices here. And these are really cool models. I mean, the releases that they have are really nice here.
And of course, we're talking about that wonderful Norfolk Southern AC44 C6M,
right?
Which at a glance, and I think that was some of the feedback, it's another wide cab GE or something. And it's like, well, no, yes and no. This is an incredibly kind of specialized piece. I think isn't like the Sonic Bonnet or some of those has some of the neat paint schemes. The blue. I assume we're talking Sonic the Hedgehog
Yes,
is where it got that name
it
because it's
is.
got the blue,
Yep.
and gray. So yeah, some neat paint schemes there. Scaletrains.com, HO Scale Rivet Counter, Norfolk Southern AC 44 C6M, and you can learn about those because they always put a lot of good product information on the site as well. And boy, they always have neat stuff. Paul Ellis, and I forget the other gentleman that was there from Scale Trains at the RPM, but I always enjoyed talking with Paul. But did you get a look at those SD45Xs
Yeah.
in that metallic blue GM demo scheme? Man, that's a beauty. And what an odd duck to have as an HO model. That's a museum quality release that's coming.
Yeah, amazing stuff out of those folks. And I'll also share a link as well. Drayton Blackgrove did an awesome job with a video on these releases, explaining them, including the rebuild process and how this all came about. So some really neat backstory, and I'll make sure I share the link to the video in the show notes.
He's a good guy. I always pick on him because I know he likes Southern and Norfolk Southern.
Yeah.
And but he's a good guy, even if he does like those railroads, nothing's anything wrong. He's someone that's, you want to pick on him a little bit, I think, or at least I do. I've worked with him for years, so it's always fun to tease him a bit. He's a new dad this year.
Yes, he is. Congratulations to Drayton and his wife, and on their new addition to their family. And he's doing that and still working away and doing some great stuff on the marketing side for Scale Trains. So awesome.
Absolutely.
Stuff.
So I will follow that link because I don't think I've seen that video yet. So I need to be educated on this. Yeah. One that I know a little better than the AC44C6M is the old EMD GP35. And Walther's Proto these are late phase proto level Jeep 35s that have come out recently. I've got a group of those. Ryan Crawford's reviewing a Gulfmobile in Ohio, and I think I have an N&W in Southern, speaking of Southern, coming up for review in Model Railroad News. And not only have they just landed this neat group of 35s, they just announced another group. And in that group, there's Rock Island, Frisco, RF&P. I'm trying to think. There's a Frisco, if I didn't say that. The Frisco is one that caught my attention because I remember the Frisco ones, they came in black. Some had torpedo tubes on the top because they had a bigger fuel tank, and then some had AAR trucks. And I can't remember, as I looked at the Walthers model, I think it was AAR trucks and a more regular looking fuel tank. And I was like, what in huh? So I dug out my diesel era that went through all the Frisco orders. And yes, there were 3 orders that Frisco bought. First one came in black. And again, they bought the bigger fuel tank because they were doing a pool thing with the Santa Fe from Birmingham, Alabama to Los Angeles. So they had the torpedo tanks on the top of the roof for the air tanks. And then they had a really odd, like big bathtub fuel tank that was put on the bottom. And then the next order, I believe, is the one where they trade in the FAs. So they had AAR trucks, but a more regular looking fuel tank. And then there's also an order in there with Blomberg trucks that, again, has a more regular-looking fuel tank contour-wise and no torpedoes on the roof. So Frisco 35s had a lot more going on than I realized. So I'm excited for this run. All road-specific details. They'll come with ESU sound and DCC. And, of course, there's also a standard DC version. I believe it comes with a speaker now, too, which, we're seeing more and more of that. But that's Walther's Proto. There's 35s you can go get today. And at least about another half dozen road names that are announced for delivery in the next, I think it's maybe next spring they come out.
You ever seen the meme with the Tiger King where he says, I will never financially recover from this? If anybody comes out with a GP35M in Housatonic, I will never financially recover from that because although I don't model it, I'd have to have it. It's just, so they're they're tiptoeing around GP35s. Not if there may be an M, maybe somebody will not to be one of those, but maybe it'll happen. And then of course that'll financially ruin me to a point where I'll never recover from it. So just saying.
And that does happen. I know, but it's fun. That's a good way to go.
Yeah.
Our friends at Atlas just to release their first run of Master Line HO Scale MP36 diesels. That's at kind of rounded nose commuter locomotive. I got a white Metrolink, which I think is Southern California, and a really pretty blue Metro, which is Chicago, in his samples, one with sound, one without sound. And again, they have speakers built into them. I have Kevin J. Holland, the editor of Passenger Train Journal. I sent off the Metrolink one for him to review. I'm still hanging on to the Metro one, and I've emailed Matt Mosikas at Atlas to help me figure out how to get into it. That I took the couplers off because I wanted to get a picture of the drive mechanism, first of all, because it's a first release for Atlas. I think this tooling is True Line Train Heritage, but Atlas has done things to it, so I know it's going to be different on the inside. And I wanted to show this Sound Ready Silver Edition. And like I say, I've kind of taken it apart. I don't see anything in the instruction manual. I've made a couple attempts, but it's got lots of piping and conduit underneath on the frame, and I'm just waiting for something to pop and go flying while I'm trying to get the shell off. So I'm still working on that. I have a video ready to put up on my YouTube channel for this as of an unboxing, but I got to talk to Matt on how to pop the thing open. But all new, again, I say all new to the Atlas line. I believe the tooling for the shell has heritage with True Line trains, if you remember those folks. Really beautiful looking piece. That's an Atlas Master MP36 commuter diesel locomotive. And in N-scale, they're delivering those new SD45s, which look really good. There's a number of road specific. There's like the High Hood Bicentennial N&W. The SP has an L-shaped front cab window in the nose light package. So that's new from Atlas in N-scale.
Awesome.
And then locally, I got a couple of things to mention. I think we talked about it recently, that my HO Collector Annual from White River Productions, it is officially out. I've actually seen it and gotten it back from the printer, and it is available now. And I think its pre-sale price is good through August 31st. So you still have a couple of weeks. You can get it for $30 instead of $34.95 from White River. And that's shop.whiteriverproductions.com. And the other annual that just landed, I just mentioned Kevin Holland, his Passenger Train Annual is out for 2024. And what the cover story is 75 years of Bud's RDC, rail diesel cars. And I think this is an extended cover feature that goes back to 1949, goes through all the origin, the owners, survivors still in service today. And that's just one of the features in this year's Passenger Train Annual. Again, it's $34.95, but it has a pre-sale price. It just came out right after HO Collector, so I think its pre-sale or pre-publication sale goes through September 30th, I'm seeing on White River's website. Other things in that one is the Amtrak ACS 64 album and a thing on, I'm interested in this, there's a thing on Burlington's Shovel-Nose Zephyrs in their twilight years, where the one seen Steeler, like Pioneer Zephyrs, it says they ended up being used in like helper service later. And I do remember seeing pictures where they were kind of in secondary trains, running behind an E-unit or something. So I think that'll be a fun piece. But both of those you can find by going to shop.whiteriverproductions.com, among other things like the Model Railroad News that I do, and Diesel Era that's just rolled out with a cover story on Rio Grande's SD50s, and we show the first CPKC painted locomotives. There's a picture of Shane Mason's, I believe, is on the front cover of that CPKC unit, and a picture of my dad's of the Rio Grande SD50s back in the 80s.
Awesome stuff. And that HO Collector Annual, if you're a late 70s, early 80s kid like me, all that Tyco stuff's going to be a walk down memory lane, and I'll be making sure I grab that. We talked about that when we mentioned it the last time, and I'm just looking forward to being able to go over and put it in front of Dad and say, "Hey, remember buying this? Remember buying that?" Yeah. So
I got a couple emails this week on the, I told you when we did our whole piece on it a couple shows ago that I went through all those Pola kits, like the Lowe's movie theater and the Pizza Hut and Burger King that they did. And I've already gotten 2 or 3 emails this week with it just landing. People going, "Oh, it's so cool to see the whole survey and rundown of all those different kits."
Oh yeah.
And so that's fun to see that feedback.
Nice to get a little nostalgia in there. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Is both your HO and N-scale boxcar still touring?
Yes.
Because I haven't seen anything on the N-scale lately. Although maybe is it on a different page?
The N-scale made it to the National Convention thanks to Speed Muller. and Michelle Kempema. It came out of Evanston, Wyoming, and now it is on its way to Texas. And the HO scale boxcar was just in Texas. It was at Greg McComas's Michigan Interstate, and it's on its way. Actually, it's in Arkansas now. And then after leaving Arkansas, we'll be heading to Charlotte for an event in the Charlotte area. So the both of them are out there moving around, getting photos. It is a slow process, especially when we start jumping over 3-4 states, but the cars are still out there. And if you want to sign up, aroundthelayout.com/2022. And then thank you again for covering that in Model Railroad News.
I think we had pictures of it on Ryan Crawford's CNIM layout. Yeah. I think it needs to come to me for its last stop, and it can either be here on the Model Railroad News test loop, which really isn't a railroad, or if it has a box, I should put it in its box and then set it on my shelf with other boxes. So you see, this is how I do model railroading. Here is your Around the Layout podcast boxcar in its box on the shelf with all my other freight cars in boxes.
It'll hit the layout of a collector. That's for sure.
There you go. And that's where it goes. It goes to rest on the shelf in its box.
Well, it's got a lot of traveling ahead of it before it makes any rest. We still have Australia, New Zealand, the UK, Switzerland, Canada, and then a whole bunch more stops, over 110 stops scheduled for the HO car, and the N scale car is plugging along. I think that's at like 30 stops now. So,
that boxcar one, that may be a record setter. We may have to get a hold of the Guinness World Records people.
Yeah, we might have to get it around.
And then when you say like 100 and some, it's like, well, yeah, where else could you claim that a HO boxcar has been on that many railroads?
Yeah,
that's very cool.
Something crazy. Wow. So where else can we find Tony Cook?
Well, as I mentioned, my YouTube channel, I've been working on it. I unboxing and kind of just looking at some new products here and there. That's Model Train Resource if you Google YouTube. And then, of course, I'm here with you once a month, and Model Railroad News each month from White River, and Diesel Era quarterly from them as well. So, and Railroad Model Craftsman, the September edition of Railroad Model Craftsman, my collector consist is in there. And I do 3 that you may not see EMDs in model form. And I do the Rock Island TA, that RS 1325 that was Chicago and Illinois Midland, and a Missouri Pacific GP28, all brass models. And my whole thing is kind of, so you think every EMD has probably been done in plastic by now. Well, here's 3 that you may not ever see. And I have pictures of them, of those brass models from the past, and some prototype pictures as well. That's in September 2024's Railroad Model Craftsman, which I just saw my early advanced copy on it. So I know it's landing this week as this show comes out. It should be showing up in mailboxes.
Awesome stuff. And if you missed any of those links, we'll put them all in the show notes. We'll put them on our website, aroundthelayout.com/116.
Well, awesome. Always a good time, Ray. I'm looking forward to what our next show will be. September. Will that be fall? How is it fall already?
It's amazing. Time is just clicking right on by. So
rocking and rolling. Well, thank you so much, Ray. Great getting to meet and talk to Kevin Tully. And I will be definitely checking out his website for some stuff.
Tony, awesome catching up with you and finding out what's happening in model railroading.
Thanks, Ray.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Around the Layout. Learn more about today's episode, check out past shows, and much more on our website, aroundthelayout.com. Show your support by becoming an operating crew member at aroundthelayout.com/crew. Follow us on social media, aroundthelayout.com/social. And send us your feedback, aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Thanks for hanging out with us around the layout.